Welcome to Windy Hill Crochet. This is Sherry, and today I'm going to walk you through this Halloween honeybee pattern. We're going to go step by step through this tutorial. You will need a 5mm crochet hook, and we will use Premier Parfait Chunky Yarn in orange, black, and purple. We're going to start by making a magic ring, and we're going to put 8 single crochets into this magic ring. You're going to see after I make my first single crochet that I like to pull the loop a little smaller just to guarantee that I'm going to be able to get this loop tight at the very end, because Premier Parfait Chunky is just a little bit of a sticky yarn and doesn't always like to cooperate when it's time to pull that magic loop. So we're going to get 8 stitches in this first row. Okay, we're going to pull this loop shut. There we go. And then I'm going to count my 8 stitches from the hook backwards just to make sure I see where my very first stitch is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm actually going into the top of that first stitch. Sometimes I get confused where the very first stitch is. And now we're going to put 2 single crochets into each of those stitches. So round 2 is going to increase from 8 stitches to 16 stitches, because there'll be 2 single crochets in each of the stitches of our row 1. You can see that I'm crocheting with the yarn going under my crochet hook, which makes a bit of a tighter stitch for amigurumi. There we go, row 2. Now row 3, we are going to do 3 single crochets, 1, 2, and 3, and then we're going to put 2 single crochets in the next stitch. We're going to do that all the way around. So we have 3 more single crochets, 1, 2, 3, and then 2 single crochets in 1 stitch. We call that an increase. 2, 3, and then 2 single crochets in 1 stitch, which we're increasing. And our last group, 1, 2, 3, and then 2 single crochets in the last stitch. And now we should have 20 stitches in row 3. This is all the bigger our project's actually going to get. So the next 2 rows will be 20 stitches. Just a single crochet in every stitch, and we're going to go around 2 rows. You can use a stitch marker in that very first stitch so you know where your beginning of your row is. However, I am just counting my 20 stitches for each row. This is a really short project, and I just find that it goes a little faster when I'm not putting a stitch marker on and off for these very short little rows. Alrighty. 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, 1 more with 20 stitches. A single crochet in every stitch. Now once we get to the end of this round, we are going to be switching to black. We're going to start the striping part of our honeybee. And the one thing that I like to do with my bees is actually crochet into just the back loop only. It gives the stripe a little bit more of a clean line than if you go through the entire stitch. So you're going to notice that I'm going to get my black. I'm going to pull it through. I stopped on my very last stitch. I did not pull the orange to finish the stitch. I'm going to pull the black through so that the very next stitch is all black. So we're going to get our black yarn. I'm going to complete this last stitch by pulling the black through. And then I'm actually going to tie that loose end to my orange, but I'm not going to disconnect the orange because we're going to be picking it up again in the next row. So here you can see there's the full stitch. That's how we normally crochet, but I am only going to go into that back loop. There we go. So the back half. And all of the stripes are only going to go into the back loops only. Sometimes with Premier Parfait Chunky Yarn, because it is a grippier, stickier yarn, it's sometimes hard to split those stitches. So you might have to be a little patient to get your hook into that back loop only. Sometimes they just don't like to come apart. See how nice and clean that edge is? I just really like making my stripes for the bees in the back loops only. I think it looks really nice. About halfway around. Once we get to the end of this row, I'm going to end the row like I did the previous row, where I pull my loop up, but I don't complete the entire stitch with the black. I do pull the orange through. So right here, I'm going to switch back to the orange and complete that last stitch with the orange, and we're going to continue another row, only putting our hook into the back loop only. We're going to have nice clean edge as we go along this stripe. We still have 20 stitches in our row. It's really hard to see just the back loop only when you're crocheting with dark threads or yarns. So it's really hard to see the definition of where that back loop is, especially on camera with the black yarn. It's not uncommon to have additional lighting to be able to see the back loops on these really dark yarns, especially if you're new to working with plush yarns. But it's so worth it because these little bumblebees are so cute. All right, there's our last stitch. I'm going to drop that orange and pull the black again. It's just easier to swap out. I'm trying to get it untangled here because I've been turning my project around and around, and I want to get the one yarn out of the way. There we go. There's my black yarn. We're getting ready to start again. This row again is back loops only. yes, sometimes it is difficult to get that hook into just the back loop. The next row after this row is the last row we will be doing in the back loops. So it's actually 4 rows around 20 stitches each that have the back loops. All right, and I'm going to cut my black because we're done with the black and tie it off to the orange so that my yarns are secure. And now we have our last time around going into the back loops, and then these stripes just look so nice and clean. Now the bottom of where we're starting each row, I'm going to consider that the bottom of my bee. You can, if you want to make a few extra stitches in your wings, you could actually put that at the top of your bee and then tack your wings down a little better than what I do, so that you don't see the uneven joins there where our rounds start and end. But for simplicity today in this video, I'm going to put the starting and the ending of each row, I'm going to put it at the bottom of my bee. Because I'm just a little too lazy to tack my wings down with a few extra stitches. All right, here we are at the very end. There's the end. You can see there's just a little unevenness right there. So what I'm saying is you can attach your wings in that spot to cover that up, but I choose not to. And you can see those stripes don't have too much of a zigzag to them. They're a lot cleaner when you're going into the back loops than if you go in through the whole stitch. The thing that I'm noticing is that there's like a little bit of a bump on the front of my bee when I made my magic ring, which I'm not in love with. And so I'm trying to decide where's the top of my bee gonna be, because I didn't want that little extra bump in the front of my bee to actually be noticeable. So I'm gonna put my eyes in, and I'm choosing to put that section right there at the bottom, just so my bee face looks perfect. See, there's a little bump there. I didn't like that. That was my fault for not keeping the same tension exactly as I was making my magic ring. I think when I stopped after that first stitch, my yarn was a little too loose. I don't know if that ever happens to you. Leave me a comment if you've crocheted amigurumi and you've had uneven little bumps in your magic ring before. Especially when it's going to be on the face of your project. It's so super annoying. And I'm attaching my safety eyes. These are 12mm eyes. There's really no right or wrong. These guys, I put the eyes a little bit farther apart than what you can put them a little closer, but I did put them in the third row. And I'm gonna do one more row going through the whole stitch this time before we end up starting to decrease. So after this next row, I decided it's time to start putting some stuffing in to this little guy because we're gonna start closing him up. Definitely it's easier to get your stuffing in while the hole is bigger. But I like to stuff my amigurumi pretty firm. I think I stuffed my amigurumi a little firmer than Chelsea does. What do you like to do? Do you like your amigurumi to be firm, or do you make it a little looser so it's more squishy? Now we're going to start to decrease. We're going to do 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitches, and then we're going to decrease. So we go through the front loop of the next stitch and again through the front loop of the very next stitch. Pull through and finish our stitch. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets, and now decrease, front loop, pull it through and finish the stitch. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets, and a decrease, front loop, and then we pull our yarn. I'm giving you a little close up through to finish. 1 single crochet, 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets, and a decrease, front loop, pull the yarn through and finish the stitch. Okay. Here's where I decided I better get the fiber fill in because we only have one more decreasing round. I bumped the camera there, sorry. Let's get that fiber fill in there. This is such a cute and a little simple project. Once you understand how the project gets put together, it really doesn't take more than 20 minutes to whip one of these up. It's so fast. Okay, so now we're going to do just decreases. Front loop, yarn under. I guess I have to start again. Front loop, yarn under, pull through and complete. Front loop, yarn under and complete. So we're doing 8 of these decrease stitches. This is going to give us a small opening that we're going to then fasten off with a long tail, and we're going to weave that tail through our stitches and cinch the hole shut. What I love about making these small projects is there's not very many rows. B, there's not very many stitches in the rows. So they really make up really quick. And then I'm going to show you how you can make the wings for this bee without even having to sew them on. I'm basically going to tie them on. There's so many ways to skin a cat. No matter what pattern you're following, there's always more than one way to do something. And when I first started amigurumi, I didn't love sewing on body parts, and I would rather crochet pieces together. And now I think that it's kind of fun to have the little details of sewing things on. But I do look for shortcuts sometimes too. So tying these wings on just makes it even faster for me to make up a bunch of these. Okay, the sewing needle I have has the tiniest little eye. It takes me forever to get this, so I'm just gonna cut ahead. There, I saved you the pain of watching me thread that needle. We're just gonna weave this end all the way around our circle, in and out, and pull it shut. I always make a few stitches down at the bottom. You can't ever tell that they're there. It just helps anchor them together, especially because this Parfait Chunky yarn is very grippy. And then I run my yarn through the body. Sometimes I run it through several different times just to make sure it's all caught up in there. But I'm just going to cut it off right there. There we go. Time to make the wings. Now I'm going to use a dark purple Parfait Chunky yarn to make the wings. It's probably one of the worst colors other than black for filming, but I want to make the actual bee that I'm telling you about. That's a Halloween bee. So we are going to make 6 single crochets into a magic ring. The wings are a very short project here because there are only 6 stitches and then 3 rows of increase. We have to make 2 of these. And again, I always count backwards from my hook to make sure I find the top of the very first loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we're going to put 2 single crochets in each stitch. So row 1 was 6 single crochets. Row 2 will be 12. If you're new to amigurumi, there's definitely a pattern for making your circles to increase and remain somewhat flat. You always start with a certain number of stitches, and row 2 is usually always putting 2 stitches in each one. So row 3 is going to be single crochet and then 2 single crochets in the next stitch. So row 3, we're going to increase from the 12 stitches in row 2 to 18 stitches in row 3. And then this is the hack that I like to do. This isn't like a right or wrong thing to do, but I like to do for my items when I'm finishing going in a round, and that's where I'm going to be done crocheting. I like to make a couple of slip stitches just to smooth out that edge, because there's definitely, like, you can see the finished stitch. So I always add a couple of slip stitches at the very end to smooth out that circle. So you'll see me do that here. One slip stitch, 2 slip stitches, and now I'm going to fasten off with the super long tail because, like I said, I'm going to tie this wing onto my bee. So it's got to go through the whole body and get tied on. The one thing I do not like about using Parfait Chunky yarn, where the yarns are not buried into the project, is that the yarn is fragile. So again, I'm going to get my needle onto my project, but I need to sew the end here from the start of the start of the wing. It needs to get buried into the wing. So once I have my needle on my thread, I run my thread through the back side of a bunch of stitches to lock it into place. Once we have this end buried into the wing, we'll give it a little snip, and then I'm going to make another one. I'm not going to do that on camera because I'm making it identically to this first wing. There you see it, just 3 rounds, nice and smooth end. And here's our second one. Now I'm going to use about 3 slip stitches to join these 2 circles together, and I want to slip stitch really close to the long tail where I ended on the outside of the circle, because I'm going to use both of these long tails to tie the wings onto the bee. So 1 slip stitch. I want that tail to be underneath because it's going to get tied into the bee. And once you have 3, you could do 4 slip stitches if you wanted. Then you're going to fasten off and again leave a really long tail. That's what it looks like. The 2 wings are together. Fastening off here. I still have to embed on the second wing my starting yarn, and then I'll have 2 tails, and I'm gonna just pull that second tail down into the middle of those 3 stitches. I'll show you what I mean. Here I take that end I just fastened off, I get my needle and I come up through the middle and I pull that end down. And now both of my yarns for each wing are in the center on the underneath side. And they are going to go, I'm going to stick my crochet hook up through the body to the middle of the top. And I'm going to pull both of those threads in. You might find it a little easier to put the crochet hook up a little bit more towards the outside of the bee to avoid some of the fiber fill, because some fiber fill does get pulled through, but I just poke it back in. So we have 1 tail pulled through. Then I'm going to grab the second tail, and up at the top I'm going to have a different opening, a different stitch that I pull that through. So each of those threads is going down through the back side of the bee through a slightly different stitch so that they get caught up nicely on the back. See how they're both in different stitches up there. There we go. I poke some of that fiber fill back in. It'll all go in at the very end. And when I tie my knot down there, I'm going to pull it really tight. But the fiber fill will help hold these wings in their place. Nice and tight. Now I'm going to trim the ends and pull those back inside the bee. This bee is so cute. It's the perfect Halloween colors. I think the fun thing is that you can actually have multiple different colored bees I just have the black stripes. You can see off to the right I also have a harvest color honeybee. This cute little Halloween honeybee. He's adorable.